Okay, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're calling in from. I see there's quite a few people from around the globe here. So what we're going to talk about today is a presentation on 6 ways to build a better workflow. The idea is that we at Technia have come across a lot of these situations and where the customer is asking for a better way to manage the workflow process, and we've put together some ideas around what we've seen and what has worked really well when implementing this in enterprise systems. So just a quick intro. I usually pick a theme for each one of my presentations, and today my theme is going to be farms. And even though it might not be directly related to workflow, I really, when I was putting this presentation together, thought a lot about a farm when it comes to workflow. How the cows and the chickens feed the corn that feeds the farmer. Everything is very symbiotic, and all the pieces work very well together, which is kind of how our workflow process should be as well. So with that, that's why there's farm animals everywhere throughout my presentation today. Okay, so let's get started. So workflow. One of the biggest problems is that there's a definition that's not always standardized within your company. If you get the Webster's Dictionary, it says that this is a sequence of industrial, administrative, or other processes through which a piece of work passes from initiation to completion. More interesting enough also is that workflow was invented, or at least the first reference of the word was invented somewhere around the 1950s. And in the last 15 years, it has blown up as one of the largest kind of buzzwords in business speak. And what that's done is kind of create a lot of different definitions for how a workflow is supposed to work and what it's supposed to provide for our company. So the problem is that workflow is usually a pretty vague or nebulous term used to define pretty much anything along the approval process. And that's going to create a lot of these questions like, do your engineers define your workflow process the same as your quality assurance approvers? Or do you use the same tool to define workflow across the entire company? Or how about, do you even use a tool? And more importantly, does everybody know where to go to find it? So you really start to see the problems that most companies are facing when they try to standardize on their approval process. But have no fear, Technia and I have seen these headaches get resolved in at least some form at endless customers that are trying to figure out this very problem. And there are hundreds of small changes your company can make to save a lot of time and a lot of money, and even more important, your frustration. Every customer is basically out there trying to solve this in some way, shape, or form. So don't worry, be like these happy goats. We are going to go through some of the things that I've narrowed down in this long list into the 6 most impactful ways that you can enhance your workflow process right away. So with that, let me introduce myself. My name is Neil Phippen. I am the Director of International Business here at Technia. And there's my email, neil.phippen@technia.com. Currently, I'm based out of Denver, Colorado. Spent the last 3 years out in our Stockholm office, but as the international department head, I get around quite often, so there's a chance that we can run into each other at some point. So at any point, please feel free to take down my email and reach out to me. A lot of the stuff I'm going to show today is pretty new, so we're always looking for ways to add on to it, or if it's interesting to you, we would love to experiment with it in your company system as well. So please give me an email if it looks interesting to you. So just before we get started, a little bit about Technia. We are a Stockholm-based consulting company. Our headquarters is in Stockholm, but as you can see, this year we turned 20 years old, and we pretty much have a presence in every time zone around the world. The U.S. is pretty heavily covered with our headquarters in Florida, but pretty much every other country is a stone's throw from us right now. So most recently, we merged with a partner in Germany, Transcat, and that's added a lot to our reach globally. About a 400-person company based in Germany lets us add a lot of knowledge and a lot of power to our consulting team. Okay, so that's a little background. Feel free to go on our website, technia.com, to find out some more. But the thing that makes Technia unique is that we have a pretty unique group of core team members that is truly passionate about the consulting that they do. For example, this is a picture of our products team dedicated just to making sure that the solutions that we put out are exactly what the customers are asking for. So let's get into the meat of today's presentation. This is the list. So 6 ways that your company should enhance your workflow starting today. And number 1 on my list, which is the most important when it comes to Technia, because we believe strongly in this, is that you should visualize wherever possible. So oftentimes, companies lose sight of what's important when it comes to working with data on a daily basis. And that's really the core focus, is that we should focus on the action that we're hoping the user will take. And visualization can help us drive that. So here's an eye chart for you. Typically, users are required to stare at names, dates, and reference numbers in long, kind of nasty columns like this on a large Excel file, or view the process status as a text box in whatever form your current tool displays it. Well, we found that work gets done much more effectively and much more efficiently if the users actually enjoy using the software. So I know that doesn't sound incredibly insightful, but time after time we hear about the dread and anguish that these users feel about logging into their systems to have to get work done. And this is why visualization is the absolute number 1 on my list. You should make the workflow appear where the users need it, when they need it. And more importantly, make it clear and simple to everyone that's using the tool exactly where they are in the process and exactly what needs to be done. So if we take anything away from today's webinar, it should be that your workflow should be clear and simple. Otherwise, users are going to tend to not use it, not follow the rules, and get lost along the way. So let's take a look at an example. If we look at this example from my little demo environment here, what we see is that by attaching a visual workflow icon, or here if you see this list of procedural documents that I have, what I'm able to do here is attach this visual workflow icon to every item that has a workflow in process. This way, users intuitively will know that this item is in process, and more importantly, that they can get more information by clicking the icon. And when a user opens a particular workflow status, they don't have to leave the page that they're working on. Instead, this workflow panel will slide out and show them the information that they're looking for. This is going to save so much time in the long run because we have a clear visual snapshot of exactly what's going on at any moment in the workflow, and every icon will tell its own story. So the big takeaway is that distracted users are not productive users. And by using visual cues, we can tell the user a whole story about this particular workflow without a massive wall of text. So for example, we should be able to answer all these questions. Who started the process? What was the last action that was taken? Who's holding up the approval? And what are people saying about this document or change order? The goal is to get the users engaged quickly so that they can make decisions without having to backtrack or hunt people down for answers. If we put it all in front of them in a clear and simple form, they're going to get work done much better. So what I'd like to do now is switch over and give you a little quick demo of what this looks like. So here we see my list of initiated workflows that I'm involved with. Now what I can do is at any time click on one of these workflows, and we see without even opening it that we get a good picture of where it's at in that workflow process. But by opening it, I can see what's going on and who's saying what. In this case, this task was rejected, and we can see why it was rejected and what needs to be done now to get forward in this process. And at any moment, I can add additional discussions to make sure that I'm a part of this workflow discussion moving forward. And here I can send Peter a message saying, keep me informed, and I want to be a part of this going forward. So we also have, move on here. We also have the ability, in this case, I'm looking at a list of overdue tasks. And we have the ability here to, again, open up this workflow in the side panel. And we can see exactly what's going on. And at any point, I can start a new workflow based on a template in this case, or build my own workflow out from scratch. And if I wanted to fire a new one off, we would see that I could add reviewers, give very specific and detailed instructions on what's supposed to be done, or instructions. Sorry about that. And this is based and driven by the templates that we have, and we'll get into templates later on. But when we kick that off, it's going to notify everybody else exactly what's supposed to happen at each state in the workflow process. So let's jump back to the presentation here and talk about number 2. So number 2 on my list is collaborate. Collaboration is really, really important. By definition, workflow requires collaboration amongst all coworkers, teammates, suppliers, or anybody involved in the process. However, the process by which they collaborate can usually vary pretty dramatically. It could be from an email with an attachment having a few instructions, or it could be in some companies by physically walking a document over to somebody's desk and having a conversation, and pretty much everything in between those. So collaboration is really going to be key to getting the approvals and tasks done quickly with the least amount of rework or re-explanation along the way. It should be really simple for users to share this information, whether it be from across different systems in the company or off the top of their head. And the takeaway here is that if you allow this kind of collaboration in the system, the users will be able to find the information they need quicker and be able to spend much less time discussing what's already been discussed. So let's take a look at another example from my demo system here. One way we encourage this collaboration is by keeping a collaboration panel in front of the users at all time. Here, and what we'll see is that we have the ability to open up this panel and see exactly what we're involved with or who's saying what around the objects in the system that I'm particularly interested in. And this way we can try to bring them into the discussion whenever it's relevant. We can also allow the users to loop other users into the topic thread and alert them whenever new relevant tasks or any kind of information changes. So in this example, we can see that a user is part of a very complex workflow process. They've been brought into the discussion at a very specific point because they have some kind of insight to offer on the document in question. In this case, we can see that the user was notified visually with this new action icon, and that they were brought directly to the relevant task in question. Here we can see some icons up there that say that this is of high importance and that there is an action waiting on this user. And we'll see that in the demo as well. But this really helps the user see where the conversation has evolved to and if there's any relevant information that might help the decision process. It should be really simple for users to share this kind of information across systems. And this way we can see this very detailed breadcrumb trail along the way of what needs to be done and what actions are taking place. And you can see that this is going to require a lot less physical communication in order to find out what's taking place and what needs to be done. So let's take a look at the system. Here we have, let's see, okay. Here I opened up in the upper right-hand corner, I have the workflow panel, which is also our collaboration panel. So anything that users need to have detailed discussions over or see at a glance, they can get to from this panel. So what I'm able to do is see a list of all the workflows that I'm involved with here. And I can scroll down and see exactly what state they're in with these visual icons telling that story. But what's really nice about this is that I have a detailed kind of story with every one of the workflows that has been created. And I can also see by clicking on one of these that here's an important icon and here's an icon telling me that I have a task due. So again, back to visualization. If I click on this icon that says you have a task to do, you're supposed to review and approve this at this state in the workflow, well, then I can see really quickly by opening it that I can either approve it, reject it, or reassign it to somebody who's better suited. So in this case, let's go through the approval process. So when I click approve here, it's going to, of course, require that I revalidate myself in the system, give my credentials, and my approval comments. Doesn't have to be that complex. So once I approved it, you see that it automatically moved us forward in the workflow process. And now we are on to a new task, which is to go off and publish. So, and again, these workflows can be as simple as or as complex as they need to be. But in this example, we can also go through and reassign this now. Maybe I'll pick on Petter again and say that he's now supposed to take a look at this. So when I reassign, you see that the workflow changed. Test everything is still there, but you've seen that it's been ported or reassigned to Petter. So again, visualization is really key. It should tell the story of what happened as we've evolved through this workflow. Click here. So I can also click directly on the object, or in this case, this is a SOP that I have in the approved state. And it, of course, will open up in the approved state the actual document or the standard operating procedure that we have this workflow around. And of course, it opens up our collaboration window at the same time so that we never lose context of the collaborative workflow discussion that was taking place. Really important for the users who oftentimes get lost along the way. And here we can see all the details about the document. Or go back to our approval window. Our workflow window. And we can see regular discussions in here as well. And remember back when I said I'd like to be notified when you proceed, I can see these high priority discussions that are taking place or ideas that people are firing back and forth. The idea is to make this a much more collaborative workspace to get better results. And that brings us to number 3 on our list. And number 3 is about accountability. It's a really big one for almost every customer that we work with. How often do you have to physically track down somebody for a signature or a review? What if a document gets lost in a wave of incoming emails? Or maybe even worse, what if it sits on a desk while somebody goes on vacation and it's forgotten forever? We know that companies create these processes to make sure that everyone is on the same page and all the approvals are followed through in a very uniform and timely manner. But we also know that real life doesn't always follow the processes that we have in place. So people have time constraints. Some people are just lazy. Some people just forget. But we found that implementing a way to make users accountable for the tasks that they are assigned provides a really massive boost in productivity. And there are really several ways that you can go about doing this, but at the very least, your system should be able to tell you who has items waiting for their actions, who's getting overloaded with tasks, how long are things taking to approve, and if a specific user is always taking the longest time to get stuff approved or done, then maybe they don't understand fully what's supposed to take place. And the system can help you identify that kind of stuff. So in this example, you should be able to see at a glance what your system is telling you. So if you're responsible for getting these documents published or maintained or reviewed, then you should be able to see exactly how many documents you have open and how many are pending at a given time. So you should give your users the tools they need to be able to kind of create these stories for themselves at a glance. And here we can see that we can build out these dashboards using these widgets to tell that story on the fly. We also have the ability to find out who's most delinquent on their follow-up actions. And I know it really sounds too much like maybe Big Brother is watching you in this workflow police state, but really having this information is powerful for more than just the obvious reasons. If one person is always being chosen to approve and review all the documents, then they are going to become a pretty massive bottleneck in the system. So you should also be able to see the other candidates for approval who are available to speed things along. If a specific user is always taking a really long time to approve or take any actions, maybe it's upon you to follow up to make sure that they have the training or fully understanding so that you can take action and resolve the problem before it slows the whole process down. So having these visual insights into the process lets us users be transparent with the entire workflow. This way the users know the actions that are waiting on them will affect the entire process, and they'll be much more eager to move us forward and get out of these cycles. So let's take a look at that. So here I'm sitting on my document admin page, and what I'm able to do is see all of my documents that have tasks associated with them. And of course I can still open up my task window or my workflow window at any point. I can minimize that, but really I have the ability to dig deep into what this data is telling me. For example, if I wanted to compare these two graphs, any kind of graphs on the fly, I can do that. And this way I can see that quality has the most implemented documents. And I can drill down into that and see exactly which of these 22 implemented documents needs to take some attention. And I can also go back here and add some additional information to this table as well. I can use this pull down and say, okay, show me all the overdue tasks in the system. And here I can see that test everything. I can also rearrange it. But here I can see that there's one person who's really taking the majority of the time here. And I can click onto that and see that Test Everything in the system has 85 documents waiting for their attention. So somebody needs to either help or tell Test Everything to get moving. So then we can also add some more insight into the approval process by looking at some of these document-specific graphs. For example, lead time, or more importantly to some, upcoming reviews. At a glance, I can see that within the next 3 months, I have about 27 documents coming up for review. So this kind of visual insight lets our managers really quickly say, okay, we have a lot to get done in the next 3 months, and then it's going to die down. So how can we allocate some help to make sure that this gets done right? So it's really driving business decisions inside of your company. So that brings us to number 4. And number 4 on my list is all about reuse. Specifically, everything. We should reuse as much as we can wherever we can. People these days are usually almost always stretched thin. Everybody has too much to do and much too little time to do it in. And when I'm working with companies doing these requirements, one of the biggest complaints that we hear when working in enterprise systems like this is, well, can't I just copy the workflow model I built for X and use it on Y? And the answer should be, yes, you can. Not only should you reuse existing work, but you should encourage and support the ability to template documents and objects, including any kind of reoccurring actions that need to take place inside of the system. The benefits of doing something like this are immediate and pretty substantial reduction in the amount of time that it's going to take for each user who's invested in getting something done. Take, for example, a quality manager who's responsible for all procedural documents in a company. Say, for example, these documents all share similar sections, and if the work has been done and approved for one section, well, then usually it can be used for another section. So we should make life much easier on this quality manager by giving them the tools to generate this data and the approval workflow process on the fly in a really repeatable and easy fashion. So we should also be able to get down into the metadata of a document and have that be templated as well. So, for example, document properties, these can all be generated using the data that was already created in the system. And this can be attached directly to the workflow on a template basis for SOPs, in this case. And then we also have the ability to fill out each one of these sections as its own template, knowing that it's pretty common to have standard headings for most of our corporate documentation that aren't going to change much from document to document. So let's take a look at a piece of this in action. So what I'm looking at now is my active documents. And if I go to create a new document, what we're going to see is that I have the ability to create this document based on a type and template. And here I can say this is part of this is a document using the SOP general template. And that gives it a specific policy that dictates the kind of workflow kickoff that's going to take place. And of course, giving it a new general document, really creative title. And then the rest of the standard metadata, but also here's where we can choose to use or not use the specific template that I just showed you. And here's SOP template doc. And this will make sure that all data will be pulled directly into the document using the template that we provided. So when I create my document here and refresh our little table, the system will go off and create that object using the procedural template that we specified. And if I want to look closer at the administrative side of things, here we can see under my prescriptive documents, general, it's a general document. Here is my document template that I have for SOPs. And what I have is the ability to go in and edit that document, of course, check it out, do whatever I need to. And building based on templates, of course, takes a little more work up front, but the overall result is a massive reduction of the total time invested. Okay, so that brings us now to number 5 on the list. And this is a really big one when it comes to getting into a true, powerful end-to-end workflow process. And that's the ability to automate, or automation everywhere. So small actions are going to add up quickly. Small actions add up. If a user is clicking one extra time per action in the system, that's going to add some level of time and complexity. So if that user has to open up a new window, the complexity is going to get larger. Time is going to be longer. If that user has to open up a new program to complete a task, then it gets much worse. So many companies have a process that maybe requires a PDF generation along the workflow process, doing some watermarking, some time stamping, or remote storage of documents along the workflow process. And it's really not uncommon to use 3 to 5 different programs or different systems along the way to get our final rendering. So the trick is, how can you ensure that the users are all following the same process the exact same way every time? And usually, almost every time, there's way too much room for errors to take place. So, say for example, if I'm responsible for generating the final PDF for approval in releasing a new document, I may need to open the CAD program to get a 2D rendering, save it, then open the PDF publishing software, then open the word processing software, and then somehow merge them all together to make a document that employees can reference as our final approved document. But what if something changes along the way? Do you really want the user to go all the way through that process every time? And how can you make sure that they're doing it the exact same way they did it the first time? There's just way too much room for error. So in this example, we see one of the ways that we've kind of let the system take care of all this hard work, using tools that we have available, like the Technia integration framework, which is an engine to drive all of this complex integration points in the back without ever having to expose the users to this stuff. So in this case, we would initiate the PDF generation automatically, do all the watermarking and time stamping and merging without the user having to do anything. Merge the CAD with the Word or Excel, and then publish it through the PDF converter, and making sure that it's saved on the remote storage that it's supposed to be. And all the user had to do is click approve. They don't have to be concerned with what's going on behind the scenes. And the amount of time that this saves is immense, because there's a lot of complex things happening that are very easy to let the system handle for us. So the takeaway here is that this is exactly why it's so important to automate these tasks wherever possible inside of your workflow process. And then that brings us to number 6, end of the list here. And number 6 is really a good way to kind of close out the list, because it involves following up. So it's great that you've started a new workflow process, you put all these things in place, but how can you make sure that you are getting the results that you're after? You can put a lot of time and investment into implementing these types of things inside of your system, but if you're not doing constant monitoring, then you can't always be sure that you're getting the results that you were hoping you were. So the takeaway here is that you should create a schedule and stick to it. And I'll show you an example of that in a moment. But even the best designed workflows are going to have some flaws when you expose it to hundreds of users hammering on it in the real world. So one example of being able to follow up is by creating a periodic review, and implementing these inside of your document process or your workflow process will allow you to create scheduled review dates, or dates based off of creation date, every 6 months, every 3 months, whatever it needs to be, to get a good sampling of what's taking place in the system. And in this case, we can make sure that these documents are all going to come up for a periodic review on a regular basis. And we can always make sure that the process was followed, and we know if it was actually saving our company time or just implementing additional hoops to jump through. So in this case, you can see that we have a periodic review section, and we're able to see when the next scheduled review is in the workflow process. So the takeaway again is constantly review your workflow process, monitor these improvements, and correct any flaws that we see. So let's take a quick look at the last piece here to the puzzle. And in this case, we see that I'm on the periodic review tab, and I can see all of these documents that have not been assigned yet. So that means that we need to take some actions. because there's some reviews coming up, and the system is going to alert me if I'm getting dangerously close. And again, we can always see that, in this case, 27 of these documents have a review upcoming, and I can click into that and get a much closer look at those specific 27 documents that need to be looked at. Let's go through that workflow process and see exactly how we can improve upon that. So let me recap what we covered in the last 45 minutes here. To build a better workflow, we found these 6 things really make a big impact. Visualize, collaborate, make people accountable, reuse all the information you can, automate everything you can, and always follow up. So again, these are some of the ways that Technia has started solving the workflow conundrum, and we are always very interested to see how you're solving it and if perhaps some of our tools could be used to help you do it better. So with that, if there are any questions from anybody watching, you can type them into the little questions box, and I will take about the next 5 minutes here to answer. Or you can always send me an email at neil.phippen@technia.com, and you can read more about this, and I'll publish this write-up, blog, and video on technia.com within the next few days here. So thank you very much for listening today, and I hope that we can talk soon about coming up with some new ways to solve workflow together. Okay, so there are a few questions here. Let me read them and then we'll go through them. Okay, I have a question here that says, the workflow that was shown in the demo, are they a Technia feature or part of the Innovia solution? This is a specific Technia services engagement that we've done to help specific customers that have high priorities for workflow. The idea is that this will evolve maybe into something more in the future, but at this point it's a Technia service that we offer. Okay, another question just came in. How do we capture metrics of how long each workflow or task is taken for each state? This is based just off of, right now it's just based off a timestamp. So there's several ways to do it based off of the original kickoff and how many days it's been sitting in each state. But there are a lot of different ways that we can splice that, if that makes sense. Okay, and there's another one. Is this available today? Yes. As I said before, this is a services package that we have put together. Like I mentioned before, we're still it's still evolving, but we've gotten a lot of really, really great initial reviews at the customers that are using it. So if it looks interesting to you, please, like I said, just give me an email and we'd love to test it out inside of your system as well. Okay. If there's any additional, just send me an email, but thanks everybody so much for attending today. And we will follow up with you later on. Have a great day and goodbye.